All right. Now the other set of slides, we're moving a little bit into a little bit slightly more complicated things. Not complicated, a little bit more sophisticated things. Okay, so first we need to understand the concept how the scope is defined in Python. Remember the scope? You heard the word scope before? The lexical scope. So what is the lexical scope in Java? So what creates a scope in Java? Let's have a very open question. What is the scope in any programming language? What is the scope?
The access of the consciousness.
Yeah, so the range, like the scope of the variable is where you can see it, the range where you can see it. Okay? Now what creates a scope in Java? Yes.
Curly brackets.
Any curly brackets. So any curly brackets by itself is a scope. A curly bracket of an if statement is a scope. Of a for loop is a scope. Of a function is a scope, right? In Python, only a function creates a scope. Okay, so what is defined inside the function only visible within the function. What is defined outside the function, even though it is inside a for loop, if it's inside a while loop, like if it's inside an if statement, doesn't matter. Only a function creates a scope. Anything defined outside the function is a global scope, so accessible everywhere. Okay, so we have two main types of scopes here in Python, global scope and local scope. So the local scope is created by a function. Anything else is in a global scope. Okay, so if we look at something like this, now see, X is defined in the script itself. Okay, so X is accessible anywhere in that script. Now see here, when we stop the execution to examine it, we would notice that variables are organized into locals and globals. So that is organized in the terms of the scope. Now, why does it say local here? This is local within the script. Okay, and because we are stopping right here, so this is not inside any function. So both the local and the global scope are the same. Yes. No, it's not like a pen. So in Java, if you define a variable inside a function, is that accessible outside a function? Can you read it? No, you can't. It doesn't even. It's impossible. Even with, no, it's not. You see, we're talking about private and public in the class. We're not talking about classes yet. Now, Python is not completely object-oriented language. It's object-based language. So here we can define variables and put code like on the fly like this, not within a class, right? So just we define the variable and put some code in the script itself and not inside a class. So if we define a variable inside a function, it's only accessible within the function. If we define it outside, it's accessible everywhere in that script. So it's local to the script. I mean, it's local and global with respect to the script itself. Okay, so let's code it. It becomes easier to see when we start coding. Actually, I'm gonna write it from scratch so that we can see it. Okay, so now if I define variable x equal, say, 5. Now I can use this variable anywhere. Now let's say we have another block of code here in a for loop. So let's say for I in range of x. So obviously x is accessible to this line because it's in the same script. Okay, now we're gonna go like have an indentation to indicate that what's coming is part of the for loop, right? Now if I define something like y equal so let's say I by 2. So this is a variable also defined. If you define a variable of I in the for loop of Java, it would be local to the loop. Once you're out of the loop, it's not seen, right? Here, it is defined within the loop, but because the loop doesn't create context, it's still accessible everywhere, and we'll see that. So let's say we are using I to calculate Y, and then let's say we're gonna print both X and Y here. Okay? Now later on, I'm gonna define a function, let's say call it add, that has two variables, A and B. Okay, now when I am inside the function, I will define another variable called C that is equal A plus B. Okay, now the idea is that we want to compare how Y and I are visible are seen to how C, A, and B are seen. Okay, so let's say I'm gonna here try to print X and Y and I, and I will also try to print A, B, and C. Okay, now all this is happening inside the function because of the indentation, right? Now once I remove the indentation, I'm outside of the function, right? Now let me try to call it. So 5 and 7. Okay, now let me run this in debug mode, right? And we're gonna stop right before we execute the function. Okay, so the function is defined, but we didn't execute it yet. So right now we have something called add that is a special type of variables, the function variable, but it's not executed. We have 4 things happening as well, 3 other things happening here. I still present, X still present, Y still present. So obviously X is global because it's not defined within any block. I, it looks like it's defined within 4, but 4 doesn't create a scope. Y is like defined within the for loop, but still is not a local scope, so it's still accessible after the loop ended. Okay, now I'm gonna step inside. Now see how it happens, the local and the global are the same because we are outside on the script. I'm gonna step inside the function now. Now let's see, notice what's gonna happen here when we step inside the function. Now see what happened? The local scope is only what is local to the function. Okay? The global scope is what was accessible outside of the function. Okay, so now because we are inside the scope of the function, at this moment we only can see A and B. And then once we step over line H, we will add C to it. And then are we able to print X and Y and I? Yes, because they are still accessible through the global scope. Okay, so when we try to print them, they will print no problem. If we try to print A, B, and C, of course, they are no problem because they are local. So, so what is accessible to the function is what is local to it, plus what is global as well. Okay, let's try to compare this to how it looks like when we step inside the loop. So right now I'm gonna stop right before the loop. At this moment, we only have one variable that is X. Okay, and because we are on the script level, global and local are the same. Now we are about to define the loop. So we should expect that I would be introduced here, somewhere here. Now when we step over the definition, now we have I that was defined in the global scope that is local to the script. So at this level, both local and global are the same. Now we are about to introduce Y. Okay? All right. Now y is introduced. We can access it. We keep working with it. And then once we exit the loop, what happens? Once we exit the loop, now if it was in Java, once we exit the loop, I and y would have disappeared. Okay? But this is not what happened in Python. I and y remain, and even though I was the control variable, it has still have the last value that was iterated on. Okay? Is this clear? Okay. All right, so that's the scope part. Now, this is also going to be new to yes.
What would be an example where you can't do the problem, like what would be an error?
What would be an error? If I tried to print A and B or C outside of the function. So if I go here and try to, let me take these two lines here. Outside anything after the loop ended and after the function ended. Now see what happened. Of course, there's an error with indentation. I remove it. Now see X and Y and I, there is no problem, no errors or anything. They are still accessible. A, B, and C are not accessible anymore. Okay, let me show you how they disappear from the context once we exit the function. So we are about to execute the function, right? We step inside. So once we step inside a function, a context will be created for that function. So we step inside. Here, in the context of the function, there is a variable called A and B. And now we are adding C. And we work with whatever is accessible. Now, see what happens? Notice this. Some things are global, some things are local. And I'm about to exit the function. Okay, notice what's going to happen to A, B, and C once we exit the function. They disappear. So when we execute a function, a context will be created for the local variables of these functions. Once we exit from the function, this context disappears. And it is discarded from the function, from the memory, yes. Because these are defined at the global level, a global scope. We still are not done with a script yet. So how do you finish well, the add method is done. We just exited from it. Now it disappeared. It doesn't exist. Now A, B, and C, see this error message says A is not defined, B is not defined, C is not defined. Yeah, if you define them outside of the function, they will be global, yes. Okay. Okay, so we understand the concept that there's a context created for the function. Once we exit the function, a context disappears. Yes.
How can we access y outside?
Outside of what?
How can we access y outside? We can create
C, A, B, and C are defined within the function. So they belong to its context. X, Y, and I are defined globally, so they're accessible everywhere, as long as the script is running. See, Y here, Y is defined as part of the loop. It's not part of the function. Okay? Yes.
So indentation doesn't change.
No. So only when you're defining a function, it creates a scope. If you define indent or not indent, it doesn't matter. Only a function creates a scope. See, I defined part of 4, Y defined part of 4, yes.
Okay, so let's say you use a name value pair. So like you did A equals 5, B equals 4, and then in the in line 12, if you set t equals like 3, it's like 8. That your
It's still no. It's still so. If you say a, if you use the keywords, it's still only accessible within the scope of the function. So here, a this will be based on the definition of the function. It doesn't define a.